What's up, everybody? I'm Katie.
And I'm Morgan.
And this is For Your Misinformation, a podcast dedicated to empowering women to be more politically engaged so we can act in our own best interests.
Let us break down the problem and tell you what we're doing and what you can do to help solve it.
Hi, Morgan.
Hi, Katie.
Can I keep talking shit about Jeffrey Epstein to you?
Let's talk some more shit about the most evil person in my newsfeed this week.
With the most egg-shaped dick.
Yeah.
As far as we know. So 9/11 happened. Everybody forgot all of Robert Friedman, premier expert on Russian organized crime. Everybody forgets about the book that he just wrote, and then he died. So he can't write any more books about it. So not great for America. 2001, Jeffrey Epstein casually donates $100,000 unprompted to the Palm Beach Police Department.
What the fuck?
As one does. Not sketchy. Seems normal. 2002, Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker accompany Jeffrey Epstein along with a personal assistant / masseuse to Epstein's island on his jet, which you probably have heard the name of. People would refer to it as the Lolita Express.
Yeah, I hate that. Like, there could not be a worse name for his pedophile boat. Like, ew.
It's a plane.
Oh, his pedophile plane?
Pedophile plane. I don't know if he had any pedophile boats. He might.
Oh, well, you know what? It's still just as bad.
I don't know.
Literally, there could not be a worse thing to do.
Wait, explain to me why. I don't know why. I don't know what that means.
Okay, so the book Lolita, it is dark.
Mm-hmm.
In short, it is about a girl whose stepdad molests her and, all that because he loves her and all that.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's about a child being assaulted repeatedly by her stepdad.
That's kind of even worse. So he didn't name it. Like, that's like a
that's just what
like a
people
behind
called it.
Behind his back nickname,
Which tells me that all of these people knew. Like, all of these people knew that these children are, that's
true. That makes it even worse.
Yeah, that does. Like, to me, that makes it even worse. Like, it's such a red flag that all these people knew what was going on to the point that they were like, the Lolita Express.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was just funny.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, that book is super fucking sad.
I'm not
like,
gonna read it.
Yeah, don't read it if you enjoy not being depressed. I mean, it's a good book in terms of as
like literary value.
But like in terms of story, like, ooh boy, yeah, and and like spoiler, like at the end, like it doesn't even end happy.
I hate it.
Yeah, so. Yeah, well, like I hate that extra just because of what they called it, like knowing.
Yeah. So like I talked about earlier, he knew like who he could behave around, who he had to behave around, and who he could get away with shit around. So no abuse occurred on that trip. If any Chris Tucker stans are on this podcast, you can still stan Chris Tucker. And that's according to the masseuse that went with them. So, like, he would purposely associate himself with upstanding people to lend himself credibility so that they would, like, speak positively about them. People would talk trash about him, and they'd be then, like, Kevin Spacey or whatever could be like, well, I went with him to his island, and there was a masseuse, but nothing weird happened. Like, and that, I mean, not that Kevin Spacey is, like, a good guy.
Like,
which we know
Spacey's
now.
now been canceled.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, he was smart.
Yeah.
He knew what he was doing. There's a reason he got away with it for a really long time. Or there's lots of reasons, but yeah. And then in 2002, that is when that Trump quote that everybody's heard, I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy. It's even said he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. That's a real quote. Really, really happened in 2002.
So Trump also, obviously he knew too.
Yeah, well, he'd already been participating. Like,
yeah,
he raped that girl in let me go back.
And he allowed the trafficking to happen at his establishment.
Yes, well, that's true. So, shoot, why can't I find the one about, 1994 is when he raped Jane Doe. So as far back as 1994, like he absolutely was an,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, in 15
participating in all
years,
that
like
bullshit.
15 years back from 2002,
Mm.
you know, so obviously, like, he'd been involved with this for a really long time.
Yeah.
And also, like, just kind of thinking about it too, like, if somebody was like, hey, tell me about Katie, like, or like, hey, tell me about your mom, like, the first thing you're going to say about them is like the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about them, right? And like the fact that the first thing he jumped to was liking beautiful women as much as I do, so immediately implicating himself,
Mm-hmm.
and then also adding the whole younger side, like, that tells me like the primary aspect of Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was the trafficking and assault of girls.
Mm-hmm. Probably.
Like, that, just breaking down that statement, like,
Yeah. So 2003, a Vanity Fair editor assigns one of his writers to write an article on a handsome, filthy rich, mysterious socialite, Jeffrey Epstein. Quickly, like very easily learned about the Farmer sisters, Maria and Annie, and Epstein finds out that the writer is talking to them and immediately starts to threaten her. The journalist is pregnant with twins, so she's like especially worried. So while he's threatening her, he is also threatening the editor. You're gonna hate this, I'm sorry. He left a bullet on his doorstep and a severed cat head in his garden.
no.
I know.
Oh, this is a whole new level of
I know, I'm
disgusting.
sorry.
Ugh, no. Mm-mm. Like,
And it worked. Just like it always works. The article ran. The title was "The Talented Mr. Epstein," with absolutely no mention of the abuse. Even though those girls, I mean, they were women. They're women now. It was so brave of them to come forward and tell their story, you know. And I don't know. It's a huge bummer. So ran no mention of the abuse. Epstein also lied to the editor and said that the girls were actually infatuated with him and that they were lying because their feelings were unrequited, which is like, again, a red flag. That's like, why the fuck would these high school girls or like high school college girls be infatuated with like a middle-aged man with an egg-shaped dick?
what the fuck? That's insulting as hell.
Yeah, so between some combination, and it might have even been all three. So, like, he told the editor that he also left a cat head in his garden and a bullet on his doorstep, and probably gave him a bunch of money, and it worked. So by some combination of bribery and intimidation, even though everybody, like, it was starting, a very clear pattern of abuse was starting to emerge, like, money and power continued to get him out of trouble until, like, forever. So yeah, he'd find out what these young girls wanted. He'd offer it to them, take them somewhere, give a massage, or usually get a massage, and then abuse them and repeat times 100.
Like, you know, the motto of 2020, please scream inside your heart.
Mhm.
That's what I'm doing right now. I am screaming inside
You
my
gotta
heart.
scream inside your heart.
This is awful. Like, this is completely horrifying.
Especially, like, imagine you had to, like, relive all that trauma for nothing.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah, just have people be like, wow, the talented Mr. Epstein.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and they talk about it in Filthy Rich, like, how they felt seeing it. Like, it's hard to watch. Separately, in addition, in 2003, journalists discovered that in addition to working with Israeli intelligence, Robert Maxwell.
Hi, Hazel.
Hi, Hazel. You knocked over my book. So Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine's dad, had also been working with the Russian Mafia before his death, including Simeon Mogilevich to launder money. Maxwell got Mogilevich his Israeli passport, which gave him like incredible mobility. that he didn't have before. And also he got rich, Mogilevich did, by offering to manage the money of other rich people and then stealing from them. Does that sound familiar?
Very familiar.
That's pretty much what Jeffrey Epstein did. I mean, like, there's just no other explanation for it.
Birds of a feather.
Yeah. So, British intelligence has discovered that one of the illegal dealings that Mogilevich participates in is sex trafficking.
Of course.
He was, and you like thoughtfully mentioned this, he was one of the most wanted criminals on the FBI, and like very, very suspiciously has been removed from that list.
Yeah, like when I was reading over, like, look at your notes, I was like, I'm so not surprised that Semyon Mogilevich has come up in this story, because he's truly one of the worst people. Like, one of the most wanted, until they were like, we'll just remove him from the list because he's too attached to powerful Americans, who we have yet to expose for what they are. So, like, I'm just not surprised that he's coming up in this story about truly two of, when you include Ghislaine, the most vile people. And then he and Donald Trump, another vile human. Oh, this story is full of the worst, absolute worst people. I know. Holy crap.
It's a lot. Also in 2003, busy year, complaints come into the Palm Beach Police Department from Epstein's neighbors that there are a lot of young women coming and going from his residence. So that gets their attention. They stake out his house, kind of, and they talk to three women, who were all adults, and they just let it go. The young women leaving said they were doing office work for him, so nothing happens.
Do you know how much of a red flag it has to be for neighbors to actually get involved enough to notify police? Like, that had to have been an insane number of young girls coming in and out.
Right. Yeah.
Like, what the fuck, Palm Beach PD? You had so many opportunities not to fail these women.
Yep.
Oh my God.
All right, 2004, according to an employee of Epstein's, Prince Andrew is seen grinding nude with an underage trafficking victim, Virginia Roberts, on Little St. James Island, also known as Pedophile Island. The airport staff, flight control, pilots, luggage people, everybody knew what was going on. Everybody enabled it. Again, like, I know that wealth inequality plays a part there too, but it's not like these people didn't know what was going on. By November 2004, Epstein and Trump's friendship had ran into trouble because they became embroiled in a bidding war for a $400 million mansion on Palm Beach. It was being auctioned off. Trump won the auction for $41 million, so it's worth $40 million. Trump won the auction for $41 million off it. Sorry. $41 million, and then successfully sold the property 4 years later for $95 million to a Russian billionaire. Like, how sketchy is that? Like, he, in 4 years, sold it for more than twice its value to a Russian billionaire? Like, are we supposed to think that that's anything but a Russian billionaire giving him $45-ish million?
That's extremely sketchy.
It's extremely sketchy. It's also the last month that Trump and Epstein were recorded to have ever interacted, which makes sense to me. I believe it. Like, he seems pretty petty, but also plenty of damage was done by then. Like, they have certainly had an association. They committed a lot of crimes together by then. They didn't need to have been friends after November 2004 for both of them to need to be in jail for a long, long time.
Yeah. And it's like, and neither one can ever actually, like, rat out the other for their crimes because they're too intertwined with each other.
For sure.
So they just have to continue. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, 2005. Shit's starting to get real, if it wasn't real already. Stepmom of a 14-year-old victim calls the Palm Beach Police Department after finding her daughter with $300 and making her explain where it came from. She tells them exactly what's going on. I couldn't find audio of it. They play it in Filthy Rich if you want to watch it, but I couldn't find audio of it. But she basically says, like, there's an old guy paying young girls to give him massages for $200, and if he likes them, he keeps them around to do other stuff. The police immediately figured out it was Epstein, gathered a dozen victims who all have the same stories about, and they know about dozens of other victims, and while doing surveillance, they found one of the victims' report cards in his garbage.
Like, that's extra fucking sad. Like,
I know.
that's just, I don't know, that just is so sad. Like, a reminder of just how young these girls are.
Yeah,
Like,
and like what they should really be worrying about.
Yeah,
It's
like that really breaks my heart. Like,
US
that just
history.
really hits me right in the chest.
Yeah. And they realize that it's like a way of life for him and that he doesn't think he can be caught. So in October 2005, after 7 months of investigating, they execute a search warrant on his house in Palm Beach. There's a ton of stuff missing, though there was plenty of incriminating stuff left behind. Plus, once inside the home, they could validate that the layout of the house is exactly what the victims described it as. I think the saddest thing that was in there is they had message pads, and one of like people taking notes when people would call and leave messages, and one of them said, so all the ones that were of minors were blacked out, they were redacted, so you could see how many of them were redacted and how many of them were minors calling and leaving messages. But also one of the message pads read, wants to know if 2:30 is okay, she needs to stay in school. Like,
The screaming in my heart is continuing to intensify.
I know.
Like, we were these girls same age in 2005.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I mean, I try to think of like the stuff that I was doing in 2005.
Yeah. I was on my Palms team.
I think I went skinny dipping for the first time.
I've never been skinny dipping. It
And,
feels like a thing I should probably do.
For sure. Yeah, like,
So, all right. So 2006, people really, really start to hear about this shit. They have 4 or 5 victims that are willing to testify out of like more than 40, but like 4 or 5 that will get on the stand and testify. Epstein understands how much shit he's in, so he gathers Ken Starr from the Clinton impeachment, Alan Dershowitz, and other really good defense attorneys, and by really good, I mean terrible people who have no morals. And I don't know how they sleep at night. And also I want to remind you that Alan Dershowitz represented O.J. Simpson. So, yeah. So the case fell apart eventually because, so again, they have 4 or 5 victims willing to testify on the stand, 40 other victims, and all of this evidence that they collected. Like, this should be a slam dunk, you know? Like, you've watched Law and Order, you know.
yeah.
And the case still fell apart, all because these defense attorneys said that the girls weren't reliable witnesses because people paid them.
What the fuck?
Sorry, hold on, I want to say that again. Ben, can you take that part out? So the case fell apart because the shitty defense attorneys said that these girls weren't reliable witnesses, and people believed them, which is super disrespectful. But one of the reasons that they argued the girls weren't reliable is because they were paid. So they kept calling them underage prostitutes.
No, underage prostitutes is not a thing.
Exactly.
What the fuck? That's not a thing.
So, like, the Palm Beach police chief knows that. Like, he's a good guy, actually. He's one of the good guys. Like, he is fully aware. Like, he keeps being like, that's just a trafficking victim. Like, no 16-year-old can consent to sex with an adult, so she can't be a prostitute. She's just a trafficking victim. But the defense attorneys were like, well, this one's had 3 abortions. And it's like, that successfully discredited her. And like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but like, if you've had 1 or more abortions, you're still a good person.
What the fuck? Oh my god, the patriarchy is actually the worst thing. And white supremacy also. The combination of those two things has created this entire problem.
Yes. So, yeah, he's like, yeah, they were paid, but it doesn't matter because no child can consent to sex with an adult. And the lawyers were like, we're not sure, which is bullshit. So instead, a deal is made in secret. Epstein is whisked into court, fingerprinted, and whisked back out. He's given a super incredibly lenient deal. And in the meantime, he had hired people to go through the trash of officers on the case, including at the police office itself, trying to find anything to use as blackmail against the Palm Beach Police Department, just because he was like rich enough to be able to do that. He could afford it. And yeah, either through bribery or intimidation or both, Jeffrey Epstein again gets away with it, thanks in large part to Alex Acosta and Robert Mueller's FBI. Epstein is charged with a single count of solicitation of prostitution and a single count of procuring a minor for prostitution. Neither of those things have anything to do with him having sex with a minor, even though every victim was a minor when they met him. So he gets arrested, immediately post bond, and then like consequences? Never heard of him.
Also, like, reminder, if he was not a wealthy white man, his consequences would have been worse. He wouldn't have been able to just post bond immediately. Or if his victims hadn't been young girls. Like, there's like two sides of it with why he got off. Like, he's wealthy, he's white, and his victims are young girls. Especially like young girls who maybe really need the money. Like young girls from poor families.
And don't have
or
supportive
girls in
families
desperate
too.
situations. Like,
Yeah.
that are just immediately discredited. Fucking patriarchy. God damn.
Yeah, part of the reason that Maria and Annie's case like went all the way to the FBI, I think, is because they decided as a family that they were going to report it. You know, like I think a lot of these other girls probably didn't have that kind of support to, I don't know, to make it happen. But not that it would have even helped, because.
Well, yeah, and so many of them probably didn't even tell their families, even if they would have had families that would have been supportive, they probably didn't tell them because either they knew they needed the money that badly, or they just were ashamed or embarrassed, or just told, hey, don't tell anyone or bad things are gonna happen. Like, you don't know.
Yeah. So at this point, Michael Ryder, the Palm Beach police chief, I just combined like 3 words. The Palm Beach police chief, Michael Ryder, bypassed the state's attorney office, which in Florida was Alex Acosta at the time, and went straight to the FBI saying he doesn't think justice was served, like a fucking boss. He says that the victims never got their day in court, which violates the Crime Victims' Rights Act, and the FBI takes over the case and connects what's happening in Palm Beach with Maria and Annie Farmer from 1996, because they already knew about that case.
Okay, so it only took them 10 years. But...
Right. Well, no.
Okay, it only took them 10 years to be less bad? Maybe? Okay. All right, I'm going to try to stop being positive because it's not working.
So they reopen that case and they promise Annie and Maria that they're going to get him. And they believe the FBI. And the victims' attorneys also believe the FBI, but the other victims or survivors weren't as optimistic because they know how powerful he was. So somehow Ghislaine and Epstein found out that Maria had reported them to the FBI, and she got threats for years. At one point, one of the lawyers for the victims said, "I've never seen a sexual abuse pyramid scheme like this," and not like I expected him to know what was going on in Chicago at the time, but it's so similar to what was happening with R. Kelly at the same time, except he was promising his victims like singing opportunities or like just connections that way, whereas Epstein was providing other things that money made easy for him to provide. They would both kind of give people a chance to put up with abuse for like a chance of their dream. And people like this suck. And Donald Trump has all the same personality traits as these sick fuckos. And so does Elon Musk, who I'm going to nominate as our shitty oligarch of the week because he's had some pretty anti-trans shit lately.
Yeah, he is the worst. Like, he sucks so much. Also, like, I'm sorry, so you think it's too hard to use they, them pronouns for someone when you named your kid EXA 13- 47B. What the fuck?
No, he sucks at
Like,
everything.
awful, entitled piece of trash.
Right. All right. So, 2007. Les Wexner, the Victoria's Secret guy, cuts Jeffrey Epstein out of his life for stealing a bunch of money, but he doesn't press charges.
Blackmail? Do we think that he knew that there was like a blackmail
Yeah.
situation if you pressed
Why
charges?
else wouldn't you try and get your like $50 million back? I think it's got to be something like that. Then in November of that year, the FBI had been doing investigations, but it was going really, really slow. So a private investigator found 46 more victims in West Palm Beach just going door to door. Isn't that nuts?
That is insane.
Yeah, that's like how pervasive it was.
Oh my god.
And then he handed them over to the police, or to the FBI. So there was so much evidence, thanks to Agent Kirkendall, who was a female FBI agent. She was another one of the like positive lights in this story. She put together 53 pages of evidence, dozens of witnesses that were willing to testify on record, and then like hundreds of other victims. She meets with Alex Acosta, thinking that Epstein is going to go to jail forever. And then in 2008, a deal was finalized outside of court with without the victim's knowledge. So the earlier ones, that was like Palm Beach police. That was like specific to Florida. These are federal FBI charges. So this is a different. But I mean, the same shit happens. I mean, the same shit happens. He gets away with it. A little bit less. Like he's a tiny bit more inconvenienced after this. But anyway, a deal is finalized outside of court without the victim's knowledge, which is not supposed to happen. The deal is crazy lenient, plus clients like never got to testify. So they're confused, their attorneys are confused, and no one can wrap their head around it because it's just like the deal of a lifetime. Like this case should have been a slam dunk. He pleaded guilty. He ended up pleading guilty to 2 state counts and was given immunity from any other state charges and immunity from all federal charges for himself and any named and unnamed co-conspirators. What that means is anybody involved in this shit is just given like a get out of jail free card. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, like other like wealthy white terrible people that may or may not have eventually stolen a presidential election in the United States.
Yes.
Oh.
Right. So yeah. Money, power, and influence will do that. When asked about his lenient charge, he said, any girl coming to my house was coming to get money, as if that makes it okay to rape middle and high school students. Like we said earlier, underage girls can't consent to sex with adults. There's no such thing as an underage prostitute. That is a trafficking victim. Side note, Alex Acosta maintains that he was lenient because he was told that Epstein was intelligence and that he should leave it alone because it was above his pay grade. But it never was specified what country intelligence he belonged to. And Sarah Kendzior thinks it's probably Israel and Russia and also maybe the United States. But it could be both, like Robert Maxwell.
Oh.
But it's still really, like I said in the beginning, a lot of this is still unknown.
Yeah. I mean, he's only been dead for a year. Like, there's still plenty of time for this to come out.
For sure. In 2008, Epstein serves 13 months of an absolute joke of a jail sentence. It's much more like a bad hotel stay because he's rich as fuck. So he's given work release 6 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at a company that he created right before he went into jail and dissolved right after he got out. So he also paid, like one of the conditions of him getting to leave on work release is that he would pay for the salary of the off-duty deputy who had to be with him. So over the course of those 13 months, he paid like $120,000 for that deputy's salary and overtime and whatever. Again, only an option because he had a shit ton of money. Like $100,000 to him is like child's play. He also had his own driver, and he flew girls into and out of his office while he was in there during the day.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Just over a year later, he gets out of jail. He is technically...
joke of our justice system.
I know. It's like they have a different one for rich people and poor people. Or white people, black people. Yeah. So in 2009, he gets out of jail. He's technically on parole. He violates his parole hundreds of times, almost daily. He would go to New York or to his island. He would get in his helicopter and go wherever he wanted to, and like literally nothing would happen. The rules just don't apply to him. Also in 2009, I go to St. Thomas for spring break, my senior year of high school, which is 10 minutes by boat from Little St. James Island, which he was frequently going in and out of, even though he was technically on parole. And,
Did anybody ask you to give them a massage?
No, nobody.
Good.
But I had 3 friends with me, so maybe the safety in numbers.
Yeah.
I do remember being, you only had to be 18 to buy alcohol there, so I remember getting like Malibu rum or something like that. It was very fun. I'll put a picture on Instagram.
Yeah.
People of me, well, people my age are probably getting abused like a 10-minute boat ride away, sadly. What else? Oh, okay. So 2010, he hosts a party at his New York mansion, or his New York, it's like a huge brownstone. I don't know, it's enormous.
Yeah.
And a bunch of people go, like Woody Allen goes, like not shitty people go, I forget, but like everybody went. Like New York socialites just like welcomed him back with open arms, even though everybody knew about all that stuff. I mean, that Florida case had happened, that FBI case had happened, like
Because he's rich and white, people just assume he's a good person who did a bad thing or like made a mistake.
Right.
Whereas like when you're poor and black, you're a thug and a gangster and you're a criminal for the rest of your life. You don't get 12 hours of work release 6 days a week.
Yeah. All right, skip ahead 5 years. So who knows what's going on in those 5 years?
A bunch more rape.
A lot more abuse of young girls. Yeah. In 2015, Virginia Roberts, who is now an adult, like a lot of these victims, his earlier victims are older than us, like a whole decade or more.
Yeah.
So Virginia Roberts sues Epstein and Ghislaine in 2015. In June 2016, an anonymous plaintiff using the pseudonym Katie Johnson, or later Jane Doe, filed a lawsuit accusing Trump of raping her when she was 13 years old. So that's the one I talked about earlier. I put it in 1994.
Okay. Yeah.
But it wasn't until June 2016 that this lawsuit came forward. I think at this point she would have been, well, I don't know. I could do the math. I'm not going to. Anyway, she was the same age as Ivanka that year. Cool, creepy, terrible. And it's consistent with verifiable facts from the court case against Jeffrey Epstein, who Jane Doe was forced to work for. So we don't know her name or who she, like, exactly who this is, but, like, consistent with verifiable facts, this anonymous plaintiff who used to go by Katie Johnson and then ended up going by Jane Doe, like, he raped her in 1994, and, like, that's just provable. I mean, I guess it's not provable, but it's, like, it's just unreasonable to think that it didn't happen, it feels like. Like, there's just too many, like, similarities, and, like, that is what Jeffrey Epstein was doing at the time. He was trafficking girls to powerful men, like, several of these lawsuits came forward before his presidential run even, so it's a lot of sad stuff. But
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, like even without Trump's weird comments about how he would be dating his daughter if she wasn't his daughter, like that is fucking creepy. But like even without that, I feel like this is just such a good reminder, especially with everything that has happened this past like week and a half with Representative Yoho being a repulsive person towards AOC, and her pointing out that like having daughters who you love does not just make you a good person. It doesn't mean that you're not still horrible to women. It doesn't mean that you're not still toxic and intentionally hurtful and misogynist, and like it doesn't excuse your behavior. And I feel like that's just like such a good thing that also, I mean, it's a bad thing, but like it applies so well also to Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, it's something that people need to understand and like realize, because historically, like all the shitty sexist men have probably, almost all of them have had wives, and many of them have had daughters. Like that doesn't have anything to do with whether you treat them with
and it's used as an excuse all the time. Like, you know, there are definitely people who, well, Donald Trump no way raped that girl because that's the same age as his daughter. Why would that mean that he did not do that?
Actually, one of the it's a little bit later, but one of the excuses that Alan Dershowitz uses is he was like, there wasn't a conspiracy to like cover this case up. Like it had to go through 5 layers. It had to go through like the attorney general, the assistant attorney general, so and so. So it had to go through like 5 layers of people in the American government. And it's like, so you're telling me like it only took 5 corrupt old white men to get, like, that's super believable to me. Like, I don't know, you didn't convince me that there wasn't a conspiracy theory. Like, I believe very strongly that all 5 of those men would be bribed or intimidated by Jeffrey Epstein.
It's like,
pretty easily.
sir, you're not making the point that you think you're making.
Right, yeah. Also in June 2016 was the infamous Trump Tower meeting with the money launderers from Russia and campaign staff. Also, when Don Jr. makes those sketchy phone calls.
Which I feel like is when they try to like use Hunter Biden against Joe Biden, who like, we don't even love Joe Biden. But like when they try to use that as a whole thing, it's like, really? Like, I feel like this is a pot kettle situation. Maybe you should stop it.
For sure.
Ugh.
In November 2nd, 2016, Jane Doe is scheduled to tell her story after the Access Hollywood video came out of Trump bragging about sexual assault, but the press conference never happened. My disc is almost full. Maybe I'll start having to store these in the cloud. I don't even know what that means.
I don't either.
All right. Okay, so the press conference never happened. The victim was threatened. Her computer was hacked, and she ended up dropping the lawsuit on November 4th. And then 4 days later, on November 8th, 2016, Trump is elected the 45th president of the United States. So, I don't know, not hard for me to believe that this poor girl was bullied and intimidated and threatened and probably even bribed out of doing this. It tracks with everything I know.
Yeah, so, for sure. That's just par for the course at this point with these people.
Right. All right, so 2017 or 18, I'm not sure which one, Alex Acosta is nominated for labor secretary by the Trump administration. And people start digging into the Epstein sweetheart deal from Florida because he was the AG in Florida at the time. I would be concerned to learn about this shit, but obviously congressional Republicans are not. Every single Republican and even a handful of Democrats voted to confirm him and his creepy children. Do you remember? I'll send you a picture.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, the like bowl cut.
Yeah, like it's like, yeah, it's like Shining level. Like,
yes,
holy fuck.
We'll post a picture. But
it looks so sad.
They voted to confirm him and his creepy children. I just want to know if any of them would leave their kids alone with Jeffrey Epstein. But who knows? Another like hero of this story is Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald, because she is the person who published all the details of the Epstein plea deal when Acosta was nominated for Secretary of Labor. So go investigative journalism. In January 2019, Ghislaine Maxwell visits with an elementary school to read to children, and they only realize afterwards that she's a co-conspirator of a convicted sex offender. That's just a fun fact. In 2019, a judge ruled that the federal government did indeed enter into a conspiracy with Jeffrey Epstein to violate the Crime Victims' Rights Act, since the victims from Florida case didn't get to face him.
Yeah.
And that deal was made like totally outside of court without their knowledge. So that's good news. They get a new hearing in front of a judge, and the victims get to argue their case. It becomes clear that he committed these crimes in a lot of places other than just Florida. New York takes an interest. A dozen girls are already ready to talk and have been for a decade from Florida. And they're excited that somebody's finally taking them seriously. So Alex Costa did get appointed. He was Secretary of Labor for a while when this is happening, he ends up resigning. I think probably when Epstein gets arrested, Alex Acosta ends up resigning. He pretends that he's glad that they brought new charges against Jeffrey Epstein, which is so weird because it's just him admitting that another office has done a better job than he did, which is just such bullshit. I hate him so much. It's crazy. I considered he could easily be asshole of the week, which is so impressive because this is an episode about serial sexual abusers.
Yeah.
So on July 6, 2019, Epstein was arrested at the age of 66 and not given bail. That, again, like I said, is thanks in large part to Julie K. Brown's investigative journalism and finding more victims. She also prompted them to come forward. He was arrested returning to the country from France, and it was a surprise to him because if he knew about it, he wouldn't have come back. Federal agents raided his home in New York. They found thousands of photos and videos of child pornography, tokens of abuse victims. They also found an Austrian passport listing his residence as Saudi Arabia, $70,000 in cash, and bags of diamonds in safes. This dude is a straight up comic book villain. But obviously a flight risk, he had multiple passports with his picture but a different name.
This is like a freaking movie.
I know.
Oh my goodness.
2 days later, on July 8, 2019, Jeff Berman, the judge in this case, unseals charges of sex trafficking against Jeffrey Epstein because they deserve their day in court. The victims deserve their day in court. This stuff in Florida was happening in 2006, and now it's 2019. So finally, a judge is hey, we see you and your humanity over there. Maybe you should get a chance to tell your story.
I wonder how much, because in those years since the stuff began, of the Florida stuff in the 2006, 2007, a lot happened in terms of women's rights.
Mm-hmm.
The Me Too movement happened, and when I say women's rights, I don't mean suffrage type stuff. I just mean the view of the way women are taken seriously in society. I mean, there's obviously still a long way to go, but I just wonder how much of that inspired, people like Jeff Berman to be you know what? Yeah, you're right. We should not write these women off as not reliable, and that wasn't fair, and let's right a huge wrong. And, I really hope that someday it doesn't take over a decade to actually get to that point, and then it's oh wow, these women talk. Well, let's take some action, right away, and not 13 years later.
Right. So it was July 6th that he was arrested. On July 23rd, he was found injured and semi-conscious in his cell at 1:30 a.m. on the floor. There were marks around his neck that were suspected to be the result of either a suicide attempt or an assault. His cellmate at the time was a former New York City police officer who was charged with 4 counts of murder.
Crap!
Just couldn't make this stuff up. And he was questioned about Epstein's condition. He denied having any knowledge about what happened to Epstein, and Epstein himself said he recollected nothing. So who knows? On August 8th, Epstein transfers all of his money into a trust in the Virgin Islands, which at that time was 577. I wrote billion, but I think I meant million. He wasn't no, 577 billion is a crazy amount of money. Sorry.
Yeah.
577 million, which makes it harder for his victims to get restitution. He's just extra shitty. Like, that's just
What
like
a fucking asshole.
Yeah. And then on August 10th, 2019, Epstein's cellmate is transferred out and a new one is not transferred in. The guards are supposed to check on him every 30 minutes, but they leave him alone for more than 3 hours. They say that they fell asleep. They also falsified records to say that they did check on him. Also, 2 cameras malfunction.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a lot of coincidences. But also, he didn't hang himself in the way that most people think of it. I mean, I don't think he hung himself at all. But, like, there's no evidence that he ever jumped off of anything. There wasn't really anything to jump off of. There wasn't anything, like, on the ceiling, and then the bedposts just aren't that tall. And so his brother ordered a second autopsy and found that, or at least what they say happened, is that he tied the bedsheet around his neck and then around the bedpost and leaned forward, and like that's what caused the strangulation. So
What?
I know. The shadiest part is that his hyoid bone, which is in his neck, in your neck, was fractured in 3 different places, which strangling very often does cause that to happen. Sometimes hanging does, very, very, very rarely, but most often it's from strangulation. So I don't know. So yeah, more on that a little bit later, but yeah. So more women will definitely keep coming forward. They're already at like 80 officially. But I think they know about more than 100. There's also an investigation into Epstein in France, and now Ghislaine has been arrested. But other than that, I don't think any co-conspirators have been brought to justice yet. On August 27th, there was a motion to dismiss because you can't try a dead guy. But Judge Richard Berman let the women have their day in court first. For the first time ever, they got to speak. Hundreds more have never come forward, but the way that he treated victims will go down as the model in the future for history. He is like absolutely one of the heroes of this story. But like, there were a couple women in that documentary who like talked about how much he meant to them because like he was the first person to really like treat them as a human in this whole ordeal.
That makes me so glad. Like, I'm so glad that this story at least has some heroes. Like, this story has some people who are like truly good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he worked hard to make it like very clear to them that like they didn't do anything wrong, that they were like victims in this scenario, and he really listened. So that was good. 2 days later, the charges are dismissed. AG Barr has said that he's going to do a thorough investigation, but he has a history of cover-ups, like hiding in plain sight. But between like Iran-Contra and the Mueller report, he is an expert at cover-ups. On October 30th, Epstein's brother ordered a second opinion forensic pathologist to determine his cause of death, and the forensic pathologist determined that he did not die by suicide. He was buried next to his parents in an unmarked grave, and they had to take the names off of his parents' graves because, like, they kept getting defaced. Like, imagine being so shitty that even your parents' graves have to be unmarked. Sad.
Man.
November 2019, Prince Andrew did this very sketchy interview that has gone down in history as just like a terrible decision because he seemed guilty as fuck. Just actually, R. Kelly did the same thing. I don't know if you remember that, but he did an interview where people were like, "What is he doing?"
Yeah, like why would you even open your mouth at all if that's what was going to come out of it?
Because they're like narcissists that think they can get away with shit, and then it's just like
they think they're the smartest person in the room.
Yeah, always. So Prince Andrew did a really sketchy interview. He also said he would cooperate with authorities on the Epstein case, and he just like hasn't. He's just like gone into hiding basically. One of the reasons, so they asked him about like why he had that picture. There's a picture of him with Virginia Roberts, who's a minor at the time, upstairs in Ghislaine Maxwell's townhouse, and Ghislaine Maxwell's in the background of it. And they're like asking him on TV in the interview, like, what's up with that? And he's like, I don't know, I have no recollection. It's like, that's the dumbest, worst excuse. Like, could you try hard? So one of his, I don't know, I hate him so much, he's so stupid. But anyway, one of his excuses, he was like, well, I've never even been upstairs at Ghislaine's townhouse. And it's like, how do you know that's upstairs, man? Like, you're incriminating yourself. Like, what are you doing?
Oh, wow.
She also talked about how he was like sweating on her during the assault, and he was like, oh, I don't sweat. And it's like, prove it, you fat fuck, get on a treadmill. Like, and then he was like, well, I didn't sweat at the time. And it's like, so you do sweat now. Your excuse is that at the time you didn't sweat, which we can't prove, but now you do sweat? Like, just shut up.
Also, like, sir, this is not the 1100s. We don't believe that, like, people who are in the royal family are, like, some, like, divine being appointed by God who does things like not sweat.
Yeah, no.
Like,
we know you're a human and you're probably a gross one.
We know that even Kim Jong-un poops, so, you know.
He has since resigned from royal duties over his ties to Epstein. On July 2nd, 2020, so just about a month ago, Ghislaine was arrested. On July 15th, this is still a developing story, but federal judge Esther Salas had been assigned to preside over the class action lawsuit against Deutsche Bank, alleging that Deutsche Bank had poor financial reporting practices and made misleading statements to securities investors in an attempt to obscure its money laundering and poor monitoring of high-risk investors like Jeffrey Epstein. So this targeting has to do with Deutsche Bank and Jeffrey Epstein. So on July 15th, Esther Salas was the federal judge assigned to this case. On July 20th, a gunman dressed as a FedEx worker opened fire at the family home of federal judge Esther Salas, killing her 20-year-old son and seriously injuring her husband. This is the type of shit that happens in Mafia states.
Yeah.
Any judge or official investigating Trump or Kushner or Manafort or Epstein or Roger Stone or whatever parties that are related are just like deeply vulnerable. Like Esther Salas's family isn't the only one that's been threatened or attacked. It's just the most recent one. The judge in Paul Manafort's case and the jury in that case were both threatened, and then the judge ended up lowering his sentence and talking about how Manafort had led an otherwise blameless life, even though he's like literally a blood-soaked career criminal.
It's because he's rich and white and has given some money to charity.
The judge in Roger Stone's case was, he like literally threatened her life, and she gave him a lowered sentence, though he never ended up serving any time at all because Trump pardoned him, which means he was literally never punished for threatening a federal judge's life. And then there's still like all the whistleblowers, like those that testified at the impeachment hearings, and they were like some of them, like Alexander Vindman, were bullied into leaving their jobs. And then there's like journalists, activists, lots of other people that are being targeted because they're trying to enforce consequences for the Trump crime cult, and they sought to bring their crimes to light. But yeah, I mean, it's really hard to imagine that attack on Esther Salas and her family is anything but mafia-style intimidation. So there's still like a lot of questions about the shooter, but his name was Roy Denhollander. He was a vicious misogynist and a self-described men's rights activist with a long history of threatening violence toward women. He just like hates women, black women in particular, of course.
Yep.
And yeah, it's just like classic love the culture here. But he also worked in finance, in intelligence, and in Russia. He has like I don't know. That's what we know right now. Like I said, it's still developing.
Oh my God.
We'll definitely keep our eye on this.
Yeah.
But I want to talk a little bit about Deutsche Bank too, because when you think about Deutsche Bank, I want you to think about Russian money laundering. Like that's
Got it.
what that
I can do
bank
that.
is for.
Deutsche Bank equals Russian money laundering.
Got it. They are just a nexus of corruption. They are like one of the places where like all the shitty things in the world just like converge. Last year, House Democrats subpoenaed Deutsche Bank for Trump's financial records, and they still haven't given them to them. They're also the primary bank for the for Jared Kushner, who was suspected of using the bank for money laundering and facilitating election interference. Facilitating. What's felicitating? Am I making up words?
Felicitating. That's
Facilitating.
I like felicitating.
Please
We're gonna have to figure that out.
Okay, anyway. It sounds like it should be a word.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry. Deutsche Bank is also the primary bank for Jared Kushner, who was suspected of using the bank for money laundering and facilitating election interference. There's also transactions between Kushner and Russian operatives in 2016. Deutsche Bank, I know. Like it's just how many other coincidences could there be? But they're also the primary lender to Jeffrey Epstein, who worked with them until his death. Reminder, we found out in like the 2000s that he was a fucked up dude, but they were like, it's cool, he's got money, we'll deal with him. Epstein and Maxwell were probably working with foreign intelligence and the Russian Mafia. Also, some other sketchy stuff that like all I can do is like I don't have answers to this, but like I want to make everybody aware of these weird coincidences. I mean, probably not coincidences, but Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, or former Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, his son worked for Deutsche Bank for 12 years, was tasked with handling Trump and Kushner's finances, and lent Trump over $1 billion for a failed real estate venture, which, again, like is most often just a front for money laundering for the Russian Mafia. Kennedy abruptly resigned in 2018 and was replaced by Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh had a ton of debt at the time. Like his house was really expensive, and he also had a lot of credit card debt that just disappeared. So like somebody bought themselves a Supreme Court justice, and like it's just unanswered. Still don't know. In 2019, it was revealed that Deutsche Bank was involved in a $20 billion money laundering scheme. They have a history of brutal tactics against people who try to reveal their finances and bring criminals to justice, like through surveillance and threats, just like Epstein and Trump do. It's a mafia bank. Trump Tower is a dorm for Russian mafia criminals. And we have a transnational crime syndicate masquerading as government.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this is like mafia as fuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens slowly, but then you realize, like, you look around and it's like, oh yeah, no, this is the shit that happens in mafia states. Like, that's right. So, not ideal. Let's try and get through some positive stuff. So what are we doing this week? What causes are we interested in? I donated. So because Joe Biden's polls have been pretty good, I feel pretty confident about Michigan and Wisconsin. I don't know if I should or not, but I started writing letters again to Iowa, which is a less safe state, obviously. And I also donated to every district's slate of candidates in Texas, which is also a more purple state. So their names are Akilah Basie, Ann Johnson, Sharon Hirsch, Selena Montoya, Joanna. You know what? Ben, you can take that out. Nobody wants to hear these people's names. There's too many names. Sorry, everybody. Actually, I'm just going to highlight Akilah, because I think I wrote about her, but maybe I took it out. Why did I do that? Anyway, I just donated to every district's slate of Texas candidates because they have, I think it's 10 or 11 like really inspiring candidates from there. What about you? What are you up to this week?
I did a suicide prevention 5K. So that's where my donation went this week. So not a direct political cause, but
Nice.
it's just like one of those things really lately that's just been on my mind so much because of this coronavirus pandemic. On top of all of the unrest in the world, but specifically just within the United States right now. I mean, especially for people of color and Black people and people who have been victims of police brutality, people who have lost their jobs, people who've lost their family members, people who are old and just like isolated as hell right now. Like there's just so many sad people. And so my cause of the week is very much geared towards mental health and just trying to do, make a little bit of an impact there.
Even though we're pretty sure Jeffrey Epstein did not die by suicide.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's what I'm like, also I wanted to make a joke about like, also kind of ironic that was my cause of the week before I realized that like, oh wait, shit, we're going to be talking about Jeffrey Epstein. That's funny. He did not die by suicide.
No.
Yeah.
People can also join. So if you're listening to this the day it comes out, it should come out on August 3rd. On August 5th, there is that letter writing party that we talked about with Swing Left and Gaslit Nation. You can register at the link in our show notes or in our Twitter or Instagram bios. I think that's at 6 p.m. Central Time. Register at votefwd.org. That link is also in our link tree, which is in our bios and stuff. If you haven't developed a habit of some kind of civic engagement each week, letter writing is a really easy introduction. So I really recommend everybody do that. If you have any questions, feel free to message us or whatever. We've been talking about these letters for a long time. But do you have any other actions you wanted to mention, or do you want to go on to self-care and kitten updates?
I mean, my other thing that's just been consuming my time lately has been my cats. My feral cat calling me.
Can you say that again?
The only other thing that's really taking up a lot of my energy right now has still been my feral cat colony. I care a lot about humans, obviously, but there's just something about these cats.
They're helpless.
Yeah, they really are. And it's humans' fault, I think, that, that this happened to the cats, that there's a whole colony of 20 plus feral cats. So I'm just like, well, I have to do something to help these cats. So there's my whole cat situation. And then also because I work in public health, I feel especially responsible for just making sure that I am doing everything I can to ensure that the practices that I'm engaged with are promoting health equity and making, racism is a public health crisis. And so anybody who works in public health should definitely know that. And so right now I'm just devoting a lot of my time to learning. There's so many free resources out there for that too. I mean, there are webinars that are recorded. There are ones you can sign up for. There's just so many good resources to learn about racism as a public health issue. And I think that even if you're not a public health person, this is maybe me coming from a biased standpoint, but I think that even if you're not somebody who works in public health, trying to learn a little bit more about racism and inequality as public health issues helps you really understand why it's such a big problem, and how it's systemic, and really get the scope of it. And I think that that's something that we don't as a society spend enough time talking about outside of just the realms of public health. And, you know, like maybe that's just me and my bias, the fact that I live and breathe it every day. But yeah, I think that it's just one of those things to remember to try to learn a little bit about.
Yeah. When you're like to frame things when you're thinking about them is
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah,
For
because the social determinants of health impact everything else. It impacts I mean literally everything.
Yeah, literally.
Like I was gonna start listing them and I was like, actually no, it's literally everything. So
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of a little bit of a reminder on those things. So.
Nice. A couple weeks ago, I talked about I May Destroy You. I forgot to mention the woman who actually wrote it. Her name's Michaela Cole. But new episodes are still coming out. I was like, oh, it's just a short season. It's not a short season. It's just still in the middle of a season. I just forgot that sometimes shows get released one episode at a time. But it's really good.
That still exists.
I know, but it's like a thing to look forward to. It's kind of nice. Also, Squeaky's been in her new home a full week today, and I haven't heard anything, so fingers crossed.
Oh, good for Squeaky.
And then, last but not least, I'm going to count this as self-care. I was like looking at my drawer, one of my drawers, in my dresser, and I was like, what is in there? Like, I have not opened that drawer in such a long time, and I opened it, and it's full of jeans. And I was like, what are these? And I was like, who? No, I haven't put these on since the pandemic started. Like, I'm pretty sure that's true without a single exception. So I went downstairs and I found like a tub, and I put my jeans in a tub, and I put it under my bed, and I made that drawer my fancy pajama drawer, and I made my other drawer my regular pajama drawer. So now I have, I got rid of the jeans that were making me feel bad, and I have a drawer dedicated just to fancy, comfy clothes.
I love that.
Thank you.
Like that is definitely self-care. I haven't worn jeans. I think the last time I wore jeans was like March 13th, maybe, or 15th, something like that. So yeah, it's been a while, and maybe I'll get rid of them too because I just have no desire to put them back on. Yeah,
they're wasting space. They're making
they're wasting space. This being stuck at home life has changed the shape of my lower body.
Yep.
I don't need to put anything restrictive on there.
Nope.
I like that. My other self-care, it's something that I kind of feel a little bit guilty about, is that
No, I think this is important to talk about.
Yeah, like I signed up to get like regular massages, so like at least once a month, I'm gonna go get a massage by a professional, who is an adult, who is like, what the fuck? Why I brought up suicide and massages. Oopsie. Yeah,
I was just gonna say, like, explain to me your thought process in like why, like, you have a lot of lower back pain, you have a lot of like sciatica. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yep. Yeah, I have a lot of sciatica,
like,
and I
you're
love
making
running.
sure that they're wearing a mask, like you're wearing a mask, like
yes,
you make sure
absolutely.
it's safe. Like the difference between doing like now we can protect ourselves against the virus. Like you should obviously only be taking calculated risks, but obviously you love running and you're in a lot of pain, so you have decided that like it's worth it to, as long as you can do it in a safe manner, to do that. I don't want like. I could see somebody being like, all they talk about is how everybody should stay home, and then Morgan went to go get a massage. And it's like, you can still do stuff. You just have to be careful and take precautions and make sure that, I mean, like now we have masks, and I don't know.
Yeah, everyone in there wore a mask. I wore a mask. I didn't go in until it was time for my appointment. I went straight to the room. Like it's really important with the precautions and stuff. And like I love running, and it was kind of getting to the point that like my sciatica was interrupting not only my running, which makes me happy and is my mental health like godsend, but also like my sleep. And so I'm like, okay, so I'm grumpy because I'm in pain, and then I can't run, which makes me extra grumpy. and now it's interrupting my sleep. And when something starts interfering with my sleep, like that's like the final straw. And like I've been doing the physical therapy and all of these other things myself, and someone finally gave me a massage and was like, well, why don't you go get this? It sounds like maybe you need it. And I'm not even kidding. The next day after the massage, I ran and like was almost completely pain free, like in that area where she really worked on. And I was like, man, that is great. So yeah, I'm gonna start going to do that more regularly because it's been so nice to not be in pain. Plus, like the girl that I saw was so sweet and like definitely needs business. And stuff. When I say girl, I just mean like she's like 21, which to me is a girl. That's to me that's very young. Again, this is not an Epstein situation. She is a licensed professional. But and like I'm not rolling in cash necessarily, but I can make some changes in the way that I spend my money to make sure that I can afford this for my self-care, especially because I'm like not like going out places, so I'm saving money right now with that. So that means I also can afford to like give this person a cash tip who like definitely needs it right now. Like we're in a pandemic, like there aren't very many people, especially in like industries that rely a lot on tips, who haven't had to struggle. And so I'm like, yeah, like I can give this 21-year-old girl a little bit of extra, cash in that envelope at the end for a job well done, and hopefully helping them out in the pandemic. So that's also my little reminder to, in the times that you do order takeout because you're not eating at restaurants, and otherwise, use safe, socially distanced, or at least masked services, whether it's like massage or getting your nails done or whatever, like tip people. And if you're in America, if you're in other countries, tips maybe aren't a thing. I don't know. But in America, like this is tip culture. As much as you might disagree with it or like not like it or think that maybe people should just earn a living wage, that's not how it works. And so we really have to remember that for those people who are relying on that income and probably didn't get to work at all for a couple months. So yeah, just a little reminder there too. It feels good to help people.
It does. Well, I'm glad to hear that you are feeling better and taking care of yourself.
Oh my gosh, I'm feeling so much better. Oh, it's great.
All right, well, let's end on that positive note. I guess that's all I had to say about Jeffrey Epstein. Now you guys know everything you need to know about Jeffrey Epstein ever. Well, I don't know, it's still developing, but you have all the background info now. Yeah. Even more than if you were to just watch Filthy Rich on Netflix. So, yeah. All right, well, thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And we will talk to you next week. But in the meantime, stay sexy.
And Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, although we're still pretty glad he's dead.
Yeah. Bye.
I said what I said. Bye.
Bye. Thank you guys so much for listening to For Your Misinformation. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast, and if you like it, give us a rating and a review. It helps us find more listeners, and the more of us there are, the better.
And make sure you're following along on Instagram and Twitter at FYMI Pod.
Shout out to Kyle Dibdahl for the intro and outro music, Hope Dye for the podcast art, and Ben Schlofelt for the audio production.
We come out with new episodes every Monday.